Now, I was looking this morning in my office, and I just pulled up some things from a gospel book that I've been working on for a while. And I just want to just give you some ideas of what I'm talking about. I want to quote a very, very prominent theologian that I greatly respect, Loraine Boettner. And this is what he said. And you've probably never thought of this before, but he refers to Jesus as the only expected person in all of history. And this is true. It's documented. In all the history of the world, Jesus emerges as the only expected person. No one was looking for such a person as Julius Caesar, or Napoleon, or Washington, or Lincoln to appear at the time and place that they did appear. No other person has had his course foretold or his work laid out for him centuries before he was born. But the coming of the Messiah had been predicted for centuries. In fact, the first promise of his coming was given to Adam and Eve soon after their fall into sin. As time went on, various details concerning his person and work were revealed through the prophets. And at the time Jesus was born, there was a general expectation throughout the Jewish world that the Messiah was soon to appear. Even the manner of his birth and the town in which it would occur have been clearly indicated. Now you can go back, and I have, through any religion in the world, any so-called founder, prophet, or whatever you want to get to, and you'll find that it's simply not the case. No ancient documents, no multiplicity of prophecies indicating who he would be, where he would come from, what would be his lineage, what would he do, what would he teach. But all of these are found in the person of Christ. Let me read to you something from the historian Philip Schaff that I've always held dear. This is an amazing statement. I love this statement. Speaking of Jesus, he says, "A character so original, so complete, so uniformly consistent, so perfect, so human, and yet so high above all human greatness, can be neither a fraud nor a fiction. The poet, as has been well said, would be in this case greater than the hero. It would take more than a Jesus to invent a Jesus." That's how great he is. Now, let me share something else with you just before we go on. I want to lay out a few things for you, and I don't usually do this, but I want to kind of go through just a few small prophecies to indicate to you this very important point. And we often do this in Jewish evangelism. I've done this over in Israel. And that is this: if Jesus of Nazareth is not the Messiah, then every promise in the Bible with regard to the Messiah has failed, because it can no longer be fulfilled. Let me just read a few things that I've gathered over the years. First of all, just listen to this. According to Genesis 49:10, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh," a reference, ancient reference to the Messiah, until he comes. Now, what is it saying? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. It shall not. Judah shall reign until Messiah comes. But here's the promise. This promise that a descendant of Judah would reign until the coming of the Messiah. In 70 AD, the city of Jerusalem was destroyed. The political dominion and authority of the Jews was taken away, and the nation was scattered. For nearly 2 millennia, there has been no ruler from the tribe of Judah. If Jesus is not the Christ, then God's promise in Genesis 49:10 has failed, for the time is past and it can no longer be fulfilled. It's an absolute impossibility. Now, according to Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 through 27, the city of Jerusalem was to be rebuilt 7 weeks of years, that's 49 years, after the end of the captivity. And the Messiah would appear 62 weeks of years, that's 434 years, after the rebuilding of Jerusalem. This prophecy coincides perfectly with the life of Jesus. If Jesus is not the Christ, then God's promise in Daniel has failed, because the time has passed, the days have run out, and there's no longer any opportunity for it to ever happen again. Both Malachi chapter 3 and Haggai chapter 2 teach that the Messiah was to come while the second temple was still standing. The second temple was destroyed in 70 AD. So if Jesus is not the Christ, the Messiah is never coming. The Messiah was to be a son or descendant of David, and he was to come at a time when the house of David was in low estate and held in contempt like a tree that had been cut off to its very roots. In Isaiah 11:1, the scriptures declare, "Then a shoot will spring up from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit." Jesus appeared as the Messiah in such a time. If he is not the Messiah, then the scriptures cannot be fulfilled. For even the root of Jesse now has been pulled up with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. At that time, when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, all genealogical evidences were destroyed, and it would now be impossible to prove the Messiah's lineage. According to Daniel 9:27, the Messiah would confirm the new covenant and put an end to the sacrificial system under the old covenant. The sacrificial system ended with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. If Jesus is not the Christ, then the sacrificial system has ended without the coming of the Messiah. And finally, according to the prophet Isaiah, the Messiah's coming would be marked by an ingathering of the nations, or the Gentiles. For nearly 2,000 years, a countless multitude of Gentiles from every nation on earth has identified themselves with the God of Israel through the so-called Messiah, just as the scriptures predicted. Jesus is the Messiah. And the Messiah was not just a man. Even the ancient Jewish scribes held him to be more than a man, that when he came, the son of David would be greater than David, and that he would be Lord of David, that he would be divine, that he would be God that became man. And that's exactly what happened. Now, what do the people say about Jesus? That doesn't really matter. What do you say about Jesus? You personally, what do you say about Jesus? And if you're not a Christian, I hope that these words will haunt you and haunt you and haunt you until you answer. But I will warn you, Jesus in His own teachings does say that when you hear something like this, there is a character in the Bible that happens to be real and personal. It's called Satan. And that when someone hears something like this and doesn't pay attention to it but seeks to dismiss it, then Satan himself comes by and snatches it out of their heart so that they not think of it again. That's why Jesus said, be very careful of the things that you're listening to, because to whom much is given, much is required. Who do you say that this Jesus is? Now, here's something else that I want you to see that is very important. Look in verse 16. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven."